Welcome to the Masculine Mission, calling men to follow Christ and bring strength, safety, and life to the world around them. Hey guys, welcome back. Glad that you're here on the Masculine Mission. I think I've said this before, or it's in my written material, not that there's a ton of it out there, but on the website and everything else, that, not everything we're going to talk about here is going to be totally masculine in nature. I had some exchanges with a friend via Facebook about the Masculine Mission, and he said, a lot of this stuff doesn't seem like it's about just for men at all. And that's true. After he started asking some of these questions, it kind of made me dive a little bit more deeply and to take a look at this idea of, well, how many of these traits are truly only masculine? And the reality is there's not many at all. Where we're going to see things become truly masculine is primarily in the areas of marriage and parenting. That's where the truly masculine, hey, this is a man thing, that's where those things end up. So much of the rest of masculinity, as we're going to be talking about it, are really traits that apply to women just as well if they're Christians. That doesn't ruin anything. Listen, this is a podcast for men, and even if it's a trait that women can have as well, listen, my point is, well, guys, I want you and I to have it first. Today, what I want to chat about a little bit is going to be something that is kind of along those same lines. We want to talk about the importance, right, of recognizing what our poison is and understanding from the scriptures how it is we're supposed to address these types of things. We're going to jump into Proverbs chapter 5. And today's going to be a little bit more loose than normal because I'm going to kind of go off the cuff. But this should be good. So Proverbs chapter 5, this is how it reads. It says, "My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Turn your ear to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion and your lips may preserve knowledge. For the lips of an adulterous woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is bitter as gall. Sharp as a double-edged sword, her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. She gives no thought to the way of life, and her paths wander aimlessly, but she does not know it." Going on into verse 7, he says, "Now then, my sons, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep to a path far from her. Don't go near the door of her house, lest you lose your honor to others and your dignity to one who is cruel." Now, listen, here's the first thing to catch is, one, this proverb plainly, if you read through the rest of it, this proverb is absolutely about just what it sounds like. He is, no kidding, telling his son, stay away from adulterous women. You got to think about this. When this was written, this would have been written right to a son of Solomon, which means that kid would have been in line for the throne, which means that kid's going to have all kinds of power. Solomon himself, man, kind of blew it. The scriptures tell us that kings are not supposed to multiply wives. But Solomon, we see in his own life, he had hundreds of wives, hundreds of concubines, all this stuff. But here he is, regardless, telling his son, listen, don't go after wayward women. So this was, in fact, a warning just against that. But what I want to look at today is the fact that there's also a broader principle here. This isn't only useful to warn people to stay away from wayward women. No, there's a larger principle. And this is the principle, this is what I would call is say that when it talks about this idea of the adulterous woman, I would say that the broader principle is that the adulteress is the embodiment of temptation. The adulteress is the embodiment of temptation, meaning that the wisdom that we see in this proverb has got as much applicability for the guy that struggles with alcohol as it does for the guy that struggles with women, as it does for the guy that struggles with porn. Because the reality is the nature of those things, right? If it's our thing, if it's our poison, the nature of those things are that they continue to draw us in. And the wisdom here is to tell us how to stay out of it. So I probably played my cards already a little bit, but think about that, man. The adulteress in this is first in this proverb, a woman. But in a broader sense, that adulteress is anything else that can try and draw us in. So just check out some of the language here and you'll see that this is really, really true because it's just a process that we will see and that will sound very familiar to us. Because it says this in verse number 2, or verse number 3 rather, it says, "For the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. Right? There's this idea that, temptation doesn't usually have to fight us a whole lot. It's only a temptation because it's something that you like, right? No one's having to beat you over the head to tempt you to go and to do some things that you already have a preference for. Think about this idea. It says that her lips drip honey and her speech is smoother than oil. When we have a desire, let's say if it's pornography or something like that, man, listen, the temptation that comes into our mind is very smooth. The temptation is very sweet, or maybe we have some other thing that's our poison that comes very naturally to us. It could still be ego, it could still be pride, but the point is that the enemy has a way of enticing us. The enemy has a way of dressing up that temptation, and our own flesh wants it in such a way to where it comes across smooth. It draws you in. I shared this with some guys last week, and I think I shared it on this podcast too. So I have kind of a guilty pleasure, which just sounds wrong on about 15 different levels, right? But it's one of my things. Here's the thing, like on Facebook, I like watching, I like kind of watching the road rage videos. The videos where people are in fights with cops. I'm a cop supporter. I like to see the cops just open up a freaking can on a criminal, not in a unlawful way. But sometimes to see people get what they've got coming, right? There's a part of me that really likes that. And there's a new one that I've been looking at. It's like modern day Batman or something like that. It has the word Batman in it, but it's a lot of videos of guys doing the right thing, rescuing a kid as they're running in the traffic and doing different stuff like that. And here's the thing. I've also shared on this podcast that, one of my poisons is ego. The other one is a rage, and a rage I don't deal with all the time, thankfully. But there's still something that's down in there that on the right day, the right situation, I see it percolating its way up. When I look at these videos, what I recognize is as I'm watching the video, you got the clerk behind the counter and a criminal that's, holding him up, and then some guy just completely hammers him. It gets my adrenaline up as I'm watching it. It may not be a huge thing, but I can feel it, right? There's something in me that enjoys watching that. I enjoy this concept and ideal of justice. Well, here's the problem with it. For me, it begins to put my mind on a track that it shouldn't be on, because there's a part of me that enjoys that aspect of violence. There's a part of me that enjoys that aspect of ego, I suppose, a part of me that enjoys that aspect of justice. And I recognize that what happens is next thing you know, I'm finding when I'm driving in traffic, my emotions might ride a little bit more towards the surface. And part of the reason is because I have been feeding it with watching images of violence and things like that. And so we think about this idea of, the lips of the adulteress drip honey, her speech is smoother than oil. It means that it's not difficult to draw us in to whatever that thing is for you or for me. And that's just a reality. So it gives us a little bit of a picture, right, about the way these things tend to work. But what I want to do is also talk a little bit about this life cycle of sin. Now I'm going to go and take us into James chapter 1, where it tells us about this way that sin tends to work in our own lives. Because one of the things that you saw in that proverb, as it says, don't even go near the door of her house. Right? Don't go down in the corner of her street. He's saying for the kid, don't go near the corner. Don't be looking down the corner at the adulteress's door. Right, dude, you're going into a place that's likely going to lure you into something deeper. Well, it's the same thing, or something that's really similar for you and I. If we know that we have a particular poison, listen, dude, don't go near the corner where that poison is, literally or metaphorically. Sometimes it's in your mind. That's why you see a pop-up that comes up on your screen. If you shouldn't linger at all, man. Get out of that stuff. But that extra second to admire whatever you and I might be admiring is just like walking over to the corner of temptation. It's walking down to the corner, looking at the door of the thing that you know is your enemy, the thing you know is poison for you. And that's the idea. It says, stay away, dude. Don't get close. Know yourself well enough. That's why it's not a great idea for a drunk to go that gets saved, and is dry and is sober. Not a great idea for you to meet a friend in a bar to evangelize, or to do any other thing. Dude, you just got to use some wisdom. And that's really what Proverbs is telling us. But I want you to catch this. Let's talk about, the way that temptation works. Now, I'm in James chapter 1. It says in verse number 13, it says, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But, now listen to this, but each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. So this is where it begins. right? Temptation happens. Where does it come from? Yeah, we have a real enemy on the outside, but you also have real desires on the inside. Just is what it is. Okay, let's acknowledge that stuff. So that each one is dragged away by their own evil desire and then enticed. We're talking about the life cycle of sin. Next it says, then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. So what we see, there's a process that begins with, just like it said in the proverb, a process that begins with tiptoeing too close to the place that you shouldn't be. You lingered too long. Again, let's go back to the alcohol thing. Dude, some of you guys have got no business even walking down an aisle that's got whiskey in it, because there's a little piece of you might look over, you're like, dang, I remember how good that used to taste. And you're just walking. Or again, fill in the blank with some other thing that you might be tempted to toy with or touch on just a little bit. So the proverb is telling us that, and then James is telling us the same thing. It says, listen, your own evil desire will drag you away and entice you. But that's coming up to the corner. That's looking down the door. That's a little bit of a mental lingering about, remember how good that used to be. But that's where the life cycle begins, because it goes on and it says, then after desire has conceived. Well, how did this happen? And it's using really a lot of physical imagery here. We're talking about pregnancy. We're talking about the idea of a seed getting planted in a womb and it gestating and growing, and then eventually that sucker's going to come out. And this is where it says that it's going to give birth to sin. So we recognize, man, that we have to have our eye on the ball in terms of knowing what it means for us to come close to that corner. It's the lingering thought. It's the memory of this or that. There's some things we just can't toy with. Why? Because of this life cycle of sin. You toy with it now, you become enticed, and then once you're enticed, it says it conceives. Now I hate to be fatalist, but now it's waiting for the right opportunity to make like a baby and head out, right? It's waiting for the right opportunity. Guys, think about this. Maybe you have heard of a televangelist, no longer doing it because he's gotten old, but Jimmy Swaggart, guy that, had a massive, huge worldwide ministry, and his career and everything blew up when he got caught hiring a prostitute. Well, here's the thing. Most of us get this. Maybe we haven't thought through it, but dude, he didn't wake up one day, scratch his gut, and then decide today was the day to end everything. He didn't wake up one day and say, maybe I'll go out and get a hooker. It wasn't a one-day thing. You can bet that what happened was he messed around with thoughts long enough, right? And then what happened? It says, well, that's evil that entices you. And then once that happens, it conceives, and then eventually gives birth to sin. While none of us are going to claim to be perfect men, I want us to be, reaching forward and using wisdom. We want to live in such a way that pleases God, in such a way that allows us to experience His blessings as much as possible, right? Aligning ourselves through obedience, through a life lived for Him, so that I can experience His blessing as much as possible and avoid discipline when I can. And I also don't want to, some of these things that we can do don't end with us. The difficulty that we might find ourselves in, may not stop with you. You get a DUI. Listen, you're not the only one impacted, and you know this, but your family's impacted, your job's impacted, your kids are impacted, your ministry might be impacted. We could fill that blank in with whatever, again, that poison might be for you. So that's kind of the big idea, that we recognize, dudes, don't screw around. Don't act as if we can go down to the corner, metaphorically, and look back at something we know that is bad for us. That's our adulteress. It's the embodiment of temptation. And last scripture I'll share, and I can't give you the address for it, but there's a proverb that says this. It says, can a man take fire into his bosom and not get burned? And of course the answer is no. Now listen, bosom, what a stupid word, right? But the idea is the bosom is the chest. And the point is, if somebody were to toss you a hot coal out of the fire or a hot potato, listen, if you take that in and against your chest, are you not going to be burned? Of course you are. And the point is, when we take a look at temptation, we take a look at sin, we think about these things. Listen, it's not possible for you to take it in that close to yourself and not have it impact you. Dude, I'm a guy, I want to avoid pain at all costs. The last thing that I want in my life is for God to be forced into a place where He has to discipline me because I was just rebellious or obstinate, or maybe I was too naive. And I thought that I could mess around a little bit. I thought that I could walk down to the corner of my sin and look down. I thought that I could, play the highlight reel of the memory of whatever it is used to be like, and thinking that it's not going to somehow have an impact because the scriptures tell us that it will. So that's the kind of life we want to lead. And yeah, I hope that you guys do too. So listen, that's about it for today. Hopefully this is beneficial. And guys, if you have an opportunity, please like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. And if you see this on a social media post, please share or comment, because the algorithm pays no attention to just likes only. Yeah, I appreciate that. Hey, bless you guys. I hope you have a great rest of the day.